The forced confession of how James Gibson lost 30 years of his life to a lie. Don't forget to click the like and subscribe button before you dive in. They said it was routine. Another double murder in Chicago, another suspect brought in. But from the very beginning, James Gibson's case didn't behave like a normal case. The evidence was thin, the timeline shaky, and the supposed confession? It came from a room where silence was enforced with fists. Chicago, 1989. Two men, Lloyd Benjamin and Hunter Wash, were murdered. The city demanded answers, and detectives needed someone to blame. Soon, a name emerged: James Gibson. He wasn't a kingpin, wasn't a career criminal, just an ordinary black man suddenly thrust into an extraordinary nightmare. Arrested and handcuffed, Gibson was hauled downtown, placed in a bare interrogation room under a flickering light. The detectives later claimed he confessed. That was their strongest piece of evidence. But Gibson told a different story, one that would haunt Chicago for decades. He said the confession wasn't real. It was forced. He said he was beaten, tortured, and coerced into saying words that weren't his own. The detectives, he claimed, worked under the shadow of Commander Jon Burge, whose name would later become synonymous with torture in Chicago police history. For Gibson, that room wasn't about truth. It was about survival. But when the case went to trial, the jury didn't hear about the bruises. They didn't hear about the fists or the threats. They only heard the neat version of the story, the confession on paper. Prosecutors told a simple tale, one that tied everything together with Gibson at the center. And so the verdict came down guilty. Gibson was convicted of double murder and sentenced to a life behind prison walls. For the next 3 decades, James Gibson lived in a cage. Each day began and ended with the clang of prison doors. He lost birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings. Yet through it all, he never stopped saying the same impossible phrase: "I didn't do it." To many, it sounded like denial, but history would eventually prove him right. As years passed, cracks began to appear in the official story. Other men stepped forward with eerily similar accounts. Beatings, suffocation, electric shocks, all linked to Burge and his detectives. It wasn't just Gibson. It was a pattern, and one the city could no longer ignore. Then came the Illinois Torture Inquiry and Relief Commission, set up to investigate exactly these kinds of claims. Gibson filed his petition. Investigators reviewed the record and agreed. There was enough to believe him. His case deserved another look. It was the turning point. An appellate court eventually vacated his conviction, ruling that the trial court had been wrong to dismiss his torture claims. For the first time in decades, the weight on his shoulders began to lift. And then came the twist no one saw coming. In April 2019, prosecutors dropped all charges against James Gibson. No retrial, no fight, just silence. The same state that had once called his case airtight now quietly admitted it had nothing left. Months later, Gibson was granted a certificate of innocence, a rare legal acknowledgement that he should never have been convicted at all. Stepping out of prison after nearly 30 years, Gibson faced a world that had changed beyond recognition. Freedom was real, but it came with a bitter taste. The years were gone, the family moments lost forever. And yet, the irony remained. The confession that had once been used to destroy his life was now evidence of the crime committed against him. He became one of many survivors demanding accountability, filing lawsuits, pushing for justice, and forcing the city of Chicago to confront its dark history of police torture. For James Gibson, justice didn't come on time. It didn't come clean, but it came. He was exonerated, his conviction erased, and the truth finally allowed to speak. The real mystery wasn't who killed 2 men back in 1989. The real mystery was how many lives were destroyed to preserve a lie. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked him if he felt justice had finally been served. Gibson paused, looked at the crowd, and said softly, "Justice is when the truth finally gets a chance to talk." And that's what makes his story unusual. Not the crime itself, but the way the system chose a man to fit the crime, then spent 30 years protecting that choice. In the end, James Gibson walked free, not because the system worked, but because it was finally forced to admit it had been wrong all along. Click the like button share, and subscribe for more chilling true crime story.